Welcome back to the weekend show. On the lifestyle segment today, we'll be discussing the extinction of local languages. The origin of language is usually a topic of interest to many of us as it teaches us about human existence and origin. Scholars believe the first spoken language appeared in sub-Saharan Africa. According to official data, there are more than 520 languages and dialects spoken in Nigeria, of which 9 of them are extinct today. The languages of Nigeria are classified into 3 broad linguistic groups: Niger-Congo, Nilo-Saharan, and Afro-Asiatic. English is the official language of Nigeria, although Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo are the foremost native Nigerian languages and are widely spoken. On today's episodes, we focus on the factors responsible for the extinction of our local dialects and the need to revive them. Joining us in today's program, we have
with us today a writer, a compere. She's also a co-founder of the Digital Media Development Institute of Nigeria, and she is currently the technical assistant on new media to the Honorable Minister of State. Welcome to the show, my friend Blossom Ozurumba.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you, Osasu.
We also have with us a doctor. He is a business strategist. He has a doctorate in business management. I've noticed him work with a lot of startups and businesses on strategy and how to grow their businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lanre Phillips.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Osasu, for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you both here today. We've seen the Harvards, the Oxfords actually teaching local Nigerian languages, and that has stirred up renewed interest in many Nigerians to sustain the language and to preserve it. As an Edo woman, as a Benin girl, my parents say to me all the time, you have to master the language. If you don't, you can't pass it on to our kids. And I think Benin is one of the most difficult languages to learn, but I'm sure everyone will say that about their own different languages. So what is the importance of preserving our local dialect? I'll start with you, Blossom.
That's actually a very interesting question, in the sense that it's the very question I asked myself, when I set out to ensure that my children should be able to, embrace some of their roots and be able to communicate effectively in their own language. So for me, I think the first reason probably is from a passion side. So you just want to be seen, or you just want to have that pleasure of carrying something forward, something you got from your parents, from your grandparents, and it did not die in your own time. So probably just that initial bragging right. That's on a personal level. Then on a more collective level, if everyone sets out to do this, if everyone sets out to tell themselves, okay, this will not die with me, then it's now a general, collective of people coming together to ensure that their culture does not go into extinction, and you're able to probably, as a group, collectively demand for things, in due course when the time comes.
Lanre, growing up in secondary school, we're made to learn either Hausa, Yoruba, or Igbo, and I've seen arguments where some people say, if in certain places of Nigeria they are taught the basic education which we learn in schools, if they are taught in their languages, more people will be willing to come to school and learn. Do you think this plays a role?
I actually think it does play a role. I remember growing up as well, it was compulsory to have one of the languages taught in primary school, in secondary school. I am not too sure if that is being done now, but going back to your question, I think the bulk of Nigerians still reside in the rural areas. So if our local languages were used in school, we'll probably have more people come to school, yes.
But how do we pass on these local languages to our offsprings when we are seeing a lot of intercultural marriages? So the mother is Yoruba, the father is Hausa, or the father is, Igbo, and the mother is, a different tribe. What language do we then teach the children? Do we teach them the father's language or the mother's language?
I think that will be a decision for the parents to come together to make. But I also think it presents a beautiful opportunity for them to be able to teach two languages at the same time, you know. So it's quite easy, because I remember when I was growing up, both my parents are Igbo, and what really stood out for us was you can do all your, we call it selense, you know, your whole English thing outside the house. But once you come into the house, it's there's no rule to it, but we just know that, okay, this is an Igbo language zone. So that is what we do once we come into the house. So you were probably you were born and brought up in that kind of atmosphere, so you really don't even struggle to learn it. It sort of comes naturally.
And would you say that's true for most Igbo households? Because all my Igbo friends speak their local dialect, but really we're not quite, half of us are not speaking it properly. You know, the Yorubas too, most of them also speak their local dialect. Would you say that in most of the predominant cultures, like the Igbos, the Yorubas and the Hausas, they grow up, they are nurtured with this language, that's why it's easier for them for the children to grab onto it?
I would say that, but in addition, I also would think that certain cultural inclinations, you know, attached to a certain people also help make that happen. So let's say in Igbo land, there will always be reasons for you to go back home to your village. If it's not the New Yam Festival, it's probably the Christmas holiday, and you just know that there's this unspoken rule that when you've, you know, had fun in the city, made all the money in the city, at a certain time in the year, you should come back home and, you know, just be with your people. So what I see that happen is you take probably that experience that you've gotten with the frequent times you have to go home. Home is relative now. I'm actually talking of probably going back home to your village where you have your extended family and all that. So there's always this experience. And then there's also this not so good experience where you're actually teased for not being able to speak the language, which, by the way, I don't think is right. So if anybody should be teased, it's not the young adult or the child that can't speak, but the parents that refused to teach the child, you know. So
I hope my parents are watching.
Interestingly, I read the Blossom, you've contributed and collaborated with Wikimedia and Igbo translator, and I remember growing up, my grandma had an Idoma Bible. Now with technology and all of that taking the place of books, physical copies, Lanre, how do you feel we can institutionalize our languages using technology?
There's so much. You know, for me, it's the will. Now I agree that intertribal marriages have increased over the past couple of years.
Rural-urban migration also.
Yes, rural-urban migration and all of that. But it's the will. A close friend of mine, who's from Delta State, for instance, is married to a woman from Scotland. And so they have these children, mixed race kids. It would amaze you every time you get to their house. The children converse with their parents in Ika. That is the local Delta dialect. And that's all that they converse in. So really, it's the will. Do we want to take this? Technology is available for us to use in achieving what we want to achieve, in ensuring that these languages don't go extinct. But do we want to do it? Do we want to go that path? Or are we laid back and we're thinking, because of all the things that the internet has done, let's just let it take its natural course, and if we all want to learn language in English, which is our official language in Nigeria, then we go ahead and put all our focus on English while forgetting about our core local language.
But we see, so for instance, there are a couple of apps where you can use to learn French, Spanish. I think you may know about, is anybody doing that in Nigeria? Do we have any apps that I can download on my phone and speak and listen and learn these languages? I think that's something we should look at.
Yeah, I think so. I know a certain lady, Sugar Belly.
Yeah.
She has something she's doing with the Igbo language called Sexy Igbo. It's actually a tech enabled kind of thing. So what I think we have currently, there is no collective stuff that can say, okay, this will help you do learn Nigerian languages as a whole. So probably the individuals are probably advocating for their own particular or specific languages in a way that they can. But I also think if we have a more collective way of doing these things, like I know in South Africa, for instance, there are ATMs, that's their automated teller machines. You don't just say English, there are some other local South African languages that you can see in there as well. So, and also, if I'm not mistaken, in Ethiopia, I think till you finish your junior secondary school, you are taught in the local language. So it's by the time you get into the senior secondary school that you are then taught in English language.
Imagine us being taught pidgin English.
That's interesting because I've heard quite a number of people say that they're teaching English in Hausa in certain parts of the north, and I'm like, I'm sorry, how does that work? You know,
but you'll be surprised that it will be able to communicate.
Really?
Yes, you'll be surprised. Yes, we haven't probably experienced that, so it's a bit alien and foreign to us how that would, play out. But I really think it's something we might need to explore. And you talked about the earlier system where you're actually forced to do, to take on one local language, basically Igbo, Yoruba, or Hausa in your senior school examination. It's no more the case now. And I really think we should probably just go back a bit to that particular time when this used to be what was done. I know a bit of Yoruba because I learned it in secondary school.
But now that a lot of people are making the argument that, yes, the world is a global village, and I'm sure everyone in this culture would agree with me, we look at countries like Rwanda, where you go and you can no longer ask, where are you from? Are you Igbo? Are you Hausa? Are you Yoruba? What language do you speak? Whatever. The person is speaking English to you, so that's all you need to know. So in order to foster sort of cultural integration and to, get rid of this divide amongst us as Nigerians, would you buy into the argument that we should just be a predominantly English-speaking country? We should stop asking ourselves, are you Edo, are you Igbo, are you Yoruba, and in doing so, phase out these languages that sort of show the division amongst us as Nigerians, Dr. Lanre?
We've actually got a winner in our hands, and that's our pidgin language, our pidgin English. Most parts of Africa I've heard that our pidgin English is the funkiest, so to speak. They love the way that we translate the regular English language into our pidgin English. So we've got a winner there. So if we're thinking globalization and we're thinking about the fact that we don't want to be seen as Igbo, Hausa, or Yoruba in this part of the world, we at least have our pidgin English, and we should probably strengthen it. I also believe that a lot of subjects can be taught in pidgin English, and maybe more people would absorb it.
So you agree that we should phase out the identification?
What I would rather agree with is if we have to phase out the identification, let it be the winner that we've got with us, and that's the pidgin English.
But Blossom, do you believe that this would make us more of a cohesive society? This would bring us together more as Nigerians if we're able to phase out our different distinctions of this, of all these different cultural groups? Just call ourselves Nigerian. No more, are you Hausa, are you Igbo, are you Yoruba, are you Edo? No, I am Nigerian.
I kind of think differently towards that approach, in the sense that, when you have a self-identity, it's similar to when you have what is called self-awareness. Then it's easier for you to probably empathize with other people. You can't possibly give what you don't have. So let's say you disguise yourself, your identity, in the quest for this collective identity. That's a bit of a gap somewhere that it might not play out immediately, but a time might come and people can get lost in actually being able to authenticate who they are in the first instance. You know, so my love for Nigeria cannot be removed from the love that I have first and foremost as an Igbo woman. I need to be able to love myself so much, and then it becomes, I'm not going to preach now, you know, the cup runs over.
Yes.
And then it's able to then affect.
But some say that ideology is problematic. I love the passion you have for, you know, being Igbo and being Nigerian.
Yeah.
But some claim that that's problematic because we should see ourselves first as Nigerians before we see ourselves as Igbo. You should see yourself first as Nigerian before you see yourself as Yoruba. I'm sure Andy has a follow-up question regarding this, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of the solutions people have preferred in regards to building this national unity that we've talked about for decades.
So we have a Ministry of Education. There was a reason why they were teaching Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, the major tribes, not alienating others. And I know in Nigerian universities, people study Nigerian languages. Don't you, Lanre, feel that the Ministry of Education should find a way of enforcing or reinforcing it, that in states, at state levels, you can learn one local language in your state, and at federal levels, say in federal schools, they could pick one of the big three. Wouldn't this institutionalize and preserve languages which are pretty much going to go extinct?
I couldn't agree with you more, Andy. I mean, like I said earlier, when we were growing up, it was compulsory. You had to do one of the Nigerian languages. And it didn't even have to be the part of the country that you came from. Yeah. So I'm Yoruba, for instance. Growing up, I knew that there were people that were friends of mine that were Yoruba, but chose to do Hausa. You know, so I think the government, through the Ministry of Education, has a huge role to play in institutionalizing this.
Dr. Lanre Blossom, thank you so much for coming on today's
You're
program.
welcome. Thank you.
We'll take a short break right now. When we return, more on The Weekend Show. Don't go anywhere.